And greetings. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. I'm Steve Deace with Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. Good to see all of you. And we are brought to you today by our friends over at Relief Factor. If you have been struggling with chronic pain for way too long, and maybe you're thinking, you know what, that's just the way things are going to be. Maybe. We get older. That could be the case. But it can also be true that you're giving up the ghost a little bit too soon. So how about $20 to see if you don't see a difference in your pain in 3 weeks or less? Now, if you've got clinical pain, you obviously need professional medical care for that. But if we're dealing with chronic pain, that's usually from too much inflammation in the body. And that's what Relief Factor seeks to do. It's drug-free, but created as a supplement by physicians who can prescribe drugs because they wanted to stop masking pain, but go after the inflammation that is the likely culprit causing it in the first place. Over the years, over 1 million people have tried Relief Factor, and 70% of them have seen such great results that they've stuck with the product long-term. So $20 is all it takes to see if you don't see a difference in your pain in 3 weeks or less with the 3-week quick start at relieffactor.com. Again, head over to relieffactor.com. And as we are heading into the fall now and spooky season, I also want to let you know this. If you want to take your neighborhood, your ministry, or church through the Nefarious movie, plus the Nefarious Bible study, experience them together, we've now packaged the movie and the Bible study together. All right, so there are various licenses here that you can get for a bulk order, whether you're dealing with a small group, a full ministry, maybe a full church package as well. So if this is what you want to do, the movie and the Bible study together, this was a tremendously successful launch last fall. It was a best-selling Bible study last October when we launched this. And so now we're packaging the movie and the Bible study together at nefariousbiblestudy.com is where you want to go. That's nefariousbiblestudy.com. And when you're there, use the discount code SteveDace10, my name, SteveDace10 at checkout. That'll give you 10% off your package purchase. So whether it's a small group, whether it's a ministry, like a men's ministry, for example, or a women's ministry, whether it is a full church that you want to do this with, you can do it now. Use the code SteveDace10 at checkout for 10% off when you go to nefariousbiblestudy.com. Again, that's nefariousbiblestudy.com. All right, coming up on today's show, we are going to be joined by the weekly prophet of woe and lamentation here during the final segment of the program. We've got to do a make good with Dr. Marty Makary. And not to mention, he has a book out about something we want to discuss, talking about some of the biggest mistakes and blind spots happening in healthcare right now. I mean, we all just have suffered through the last few years of a major failure and blind spot. So we'll talk to him about that at the bottom of the hour. We will do as much of your buy, sell, or hold at the top of hour 2 as we can. And then what remains, we'll get to that in the overtime for subscribers today. But let's get it rolling and started as we always do with Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by a legit surprise. The Department of Justice has charged would-be Trump assassin number 2 Ryan Routh. A Miami grand jury returned the indictment late Tuesday. The indictment for attempted assassination of a major presidential candidate adds 3 new counts to the weapons charges Routh is currently being held on. The attempted assassination charge carries a maximum sentence of life in prison. FBI Director Christopher Wray said in the press release announcing the new charges that the full weight of the FBI is being used to, quote, uncover and provide as much information as possible about what led to the events in West Palm Beach. In our country, we have to hold accountable people who resort to violence.
You serious?
Anyway, here's a dialing back the rhetoric update with Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo.
What he says is the opposite. It's just another lie. Like, how did we get here? Let's extinguish him for good.
Top U.S. intelligence officials briefed former President Donald Trump on Tuesday about threats from Iran to assassinate him. Trump said on X he's thankful for the heads up from U.S. intelligence and that he's, quote, surrounded by more men, guns, and weapons than I've ever seen before. Kamala Harris told Wisconsin Public Radio yesterday she supports nuking the filibuster in the Senate in order to pass a bill enshrining Roe v. Wade into law. Senators Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona quickly voiced their displeasure with Kamala's plan. MSNBC's Stephanie Ruhle went on Bill Maher late last week and defended Kamala, saying she doesn't need to answer questions.
We don't know her answer to anything, okay?
But you know his answer to everything.
Bada bing, bada boom. MSNBC announced this morning Stephanie Ruhle will have the first one-on-one interview with Kamala later tonight. Also on MSNBC, they asked a focus group their thoughts about January 6th.
And talk to me about your level of interest in the criminal charges and so forth.
February 6th?
January 6th.
So I remember that day. I know he was the standing president. I'm not familiar with the charges that are being brought against him for that. I'm not following that charge or I know there's multiple court cases going on. I'm just not familiar with it.
I mean, that doesn't sound like it's going to be a factor in deciding who to vote for.
No.
Okay, so when I say January 6th, what do you think?
Oh, I just remember seeing it on the news, like all the riots and stuff. Don't really know what it was about or what happened, though.
How did it make you feel when you saw it?
I don't know. I don't really feel any way about it. People showed their emotion, I guess. Probably in the wrong way, but it happened.
Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul Pelosi, dumped $500,000 of stock in Visa a few months ago. Yesterday, Visa was hit with a lawsuit that alleged the company has illegally monopolized the debit card market, the culmination of a years-long review conducted by the Justice Department's antitrust unit. Caroline Ellison was sentenced yesterday to 2 years in prison by a federal judge in New York for her role in the FTX cryptocurrency scandal. Ellison arguably was the most important witness in the prosecution of FTX founder and her former boyfriend, Sam Bankman-Fried. And a relatively lenient sentence reflected her cooperation. She expressed remorse for her role in bilking investors in FTX out of billions of dollars. We don't look now, but according to Gallup, this is the first time Republicans have led on their party ID tracker in the third quarter of a presidential year. The University of Nevada Las Vegas football program is off to one of their best starts in school history. They're 3-0 with victories over 2 Power 4 conference programs. Naturally, their starting quarterback, Matthew Sluka, is quitting the team because he claims name, image, and likeness commitments, i.e. money, have not been followed through on. And finally, how did I miss this moment from the Kamala-Trump debate?
You believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
David, here it is. My philosophy is basically this, and this is something that I live by, and I always have, and I always will. Don't ever, for any reason, do anything to anyone, for any reason, ever, no matter what, no matter where or who you are with, or where you are going, or where you've been, ever, for any reason whatsoever.
David Muir, thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
And that's what happened while we were away.
Aaron's montage brought to you by our friends over at Lumen. They are the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath, and on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs, and gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workouts, sleep, and even stress management. All you got to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and you'll know what's going on with your metabolism, whether you're burning fat or mostly carbs. You can also breathe into it before and after workouts and meals as well. So you know exactly what's going on inside your body metabolically in real time. It really helps you to get on top of your health game because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does. And optimal metabolic health translates to a bunch of benefits, including weight management, improved energy levels, etc. All right. And Lumen will even give you recommendations to improve your metabolic health. So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/Steve, Lumen, Lumen, lumen.me/Steve, and you'll get 15% off your Lumen, lumen.me/Steve. That's lumen.me/Steve. Couple of things I want to address from Aaron's montage there right off the top. And this is a continuation of what I talked about yesterday, and I'm going to keep bringing this up because we desperately need to win this election. But we cannot afford to continue the paradigm of that's the beginning and end of our citizenship. Okay. And we just can't. We are the political equivalent on the right of baby mamas and baby daddies. Just, conceiving kids and dropping out of the parenting process. That's kind of what we're doing here politically on the right.
Exactly.
Let's just vote for most of us, every 4 years, some of us every 2 years, most of us never locally. Let's just vote. And I can be as guilty about the local stuff as anybody, man. So when I say us, I'm implicating myself. There's been plenty of times, man, I've gone home and I'm like, crap, I forgot there was a school board election today. Okay. So I am indicting myself when I say this. All right. But this whole thing of everything comes down to however long it takes me to vote in a presidential election. And that's the alpha and omega of my citizenship. That this paradigm, it has to be disrupted. We just cannot afford outsourcing this stuff any longer. I know on the right, we always like to point out we're not a democracy. We are a republic. Right now, we're gonna need to be we're gonna have to babysit our proxies. And this juxtaposition from Aaron's montage, where Kamala Harris is already seeing a record gender gap in most of the polling right now. I mean, I don't know how more extreme it could get. And yet, we're going to disrupt the entire normative legislative process in the Senate by getting rid of the filibuster. And we're going to do it so that we can, as a country, legislate state-sanctioned infanticide, the mass slaughter of our own children without any restrictions and regulations at all. Now, I don't think there should be any restrictions or regulations on abortion, but not for the same reasons Kamala does. I think it should be illegal to murder people, and it is in the natural law, but I mean also in the civil recognition therein. But stop and think about this. This is the entirety of their issue messaging. It's the only issue. They're running on two issues: kill your kids, and Trump's a douchebag. Those are the only issues they're running on. That's the entirety of their campaign.
And you don't need to know anything else, Steve, because you know everything about him.
Exactly. And meanwhile, a state about an hour or so to the west of us, Nebraska, which has a much longer history of being a red state than Iowa does. I mean, I'm one of the people that helped turn Iowa into a red state. Didn't do it alone. Others did more than me, but I certainly was on the vanguard of that. It took us a decade to get to where we are. And even after all of that progress we've made in Iowa, by the way, basically our entire Senate and House delegation blows. And they all suck, frankly, for being honest. And I don't know anything else to do. They all, given how, well, in relation to how red our state is, they all suck. All of them do. They're all disappointments. Every House member and both our senators, both are basically whitewashed tombs in relation to the redness of our state. So it took us a decade to turn this state on the ground red, but we still have not been able to penetrate the larger political process of whom we send to Washington yet. We're still sending, by and large, listless vessels. Meanwhile, Nebraska has been a red state for as long as most people can remember. Yet, on the same day Kamala Harris says, I will end going on a third century of the legislative process in the United States Senate in order to make sure that we can go full apocalypto here. We can go full Incan full pagan. On that exact same day, Nebraska Republicans can't even use the normal legislative process to reallocate how their electoral college votes will be determined. For those of you that don't know, Nebraska and Maine are the two states that split their electoral college votes. And the Omaha area, the suburbs therein, have a separate electoral college vote. So, I mean, that's why the state never goes blue statewide in a presidential election, but Democrats often win that one electoral college vote. Whereas if Nebraska Republicans said, hey, we're just going to go to one man, one vote statewide here, like the other 48 states do, and it's winner take all. Here, well, Steve, what kind of a big deal is that? Come on, it's just one. Let me tell you what a big deal is. First of all, it's a big deal in terms of paradigm recognition. Look at what Kamala will do to kill them all. Look at what Nebraska Republicans won't do for one electoral college vote. And guys, I am just telling you right now, we cannot win and survive if this is our coalition. We cannot. So win or lose, man, I'm going to give everybody like the rest of the week in November, well, Christmas, whenever they're done counting the damn votes, to either lick our wounds or celebrate. But then after that, man, I am hammering this point moving forward on this show. This is not a sustainable coalition. We cannot survive like this. One side says we will kill every last child in America to win, and we will kill Senate decorum and tradition to do so. And the other side cannot even change how one measly electoral college vote in Nebraska is allocated. Here's why it's a big deal. Beyond the meta paradigm here, which just goes to show you, we can't win when they're willing to go, forget the stuff they do that's untoward. Forget the stuff they do that's cheating. We're not even to concern of that yet. Within the rules of engagement, what they will do to win. That one electoral college vote in Nebraska means that Kamala doesn't have to win a single Sun Belt state. Doesn't have to win any of them. Doesn't have to win Arizona. Doesn't have to win North Carolina. Doesn't have to win Georgia. Doesn't have to win any of them. The minute the polling goes the least bit south in Georgia, for example, doesn't have to win. I mentioned Arizona, right? Yes. Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, doesn't have to win any of those states. If the minute the polling goes south in Georgia at all, and by south I mean she's consistently down by 4, 5, 6 points, they can take all of those resources and just invest them into Pennsylvania. They don't have to win any of those states. Trump has to win them all. They don't have to win any of them. That's what that one electoral college vote is worth. Whether you live in Nebraska or not, this matters to you. A group of Nebraska Republicans could not be moved to use the lawful, traditional legislative process to reallocate one electoral college vote in what is supposedly, again, the most important election of our lifetimes. Our futures are at the stake. All the other crap we say all the time that this time might actually be true. They could not move at all in a state where there's no possible blowback for any of this. None. Absolutely none. There's no price to pay, no penalty to pay. The Democratic Party statewide in Nebraska is not really a viable entity. And the guys wearing our jerseys will not reallocate one electoral college vote. And over there, they're like, we're going to kill them all, guys. Every last frickin' one that you let us have. Kill them all. And we're going to shout about it on the way to killing them and afterwards. We'll change the entire legislative process to kill them all. Kill every last one of those kids. Kill them all. I don't know what history book you all have ever read, but just like you used to hear me say, I just want to be left alone has never won in any history book ever. I can promise you I can't be bothered up against this level of zeal loses in every single history book of all time. This is not a sustainable coalition. And it's not going to change itself. Evil's not going to change itself. This coalition's makeup is not going to change itself. The ecosystem we're operating within is not going to change itself. And if you think Trump's just going to, dude, they're trying to kill him before he gets elected, guys. If you think just getting him elected means this stuff's just going to organically change, and I can go back to singing, hymns to the Indianapolis Colts, I can promise you that's not going to be the case. Maybe you weren't paying attention to 4 years of Trump. P-tapes that didn't exist, Russian collusion that never happened, Ukraine collusion that did happen, but it's actually what Trump was attempting to expose between the Bidens and Ukraine. Maybe you didn't pay attention to any of that. Maybe you're just totally asleep. But the clicks that we all got and the engagements we all got covering that stuff indicates otherwise, that you were paying attention. So now we're at the stage of, we got to do something about this. This is not sustainable. And I'm going to make a lot of enemies probably, which I've done before, when I get to this conversation after this election. Not something I'm eager to do, but what I'm also not eager to do is just hand my children and grandchildren's future over to this feckless political party and say, here's your allies. This won't work. I will tell you on a daily basis, I covet Democrats. Methodology, in terms of methodology, I am way more like them. Way more like them. This level of anywhere from cowardice to incompetence to fecklessness and absolute traitorous behavior. I have, again, like I told you guys recently, I don't struggle to hate the hosts of The View. I was an unregenerate pagan for 30 years of my life. I know exactly where they were coming from. Now, I will fight to the death against their belief system, but Sunny Hostin, whatever the hell her name is, and Whoopi fake Jew Goldberg, okay, whatever her real name is, I don't even remember. I don't struggle at all with swallowing the bile when I see their stuff. What I struggle with is when the Nebraska governor won't call a special session to reallocate one electoral college vote that could shift the entire electoral college map for us. That's the stuff that has me down here way past my bedtime, scoring more touchdowns on the AI to get out the level of anger and frustration and bile I have sitting in my stomach before I can even contemplate sleeping at night. We cannot win like this. There is no shot to win like this. And we're going to have to reverse this paradigm. And that's if we win, because what Nebraska polled yesterday made it harder for us to win. And when you have this level of conviction on one side, and the other side doesn't even try to compete in terms of that level of conviction holistically, and I don't even want to hear this when it comes to the MAGA stuff and the level of adoration for Trump. I mean, I don't know. How many of those people leave a Trump rally and go vote in their school board elections or their city council elections? It may be, again, if you're just making it all about him and what he can do, that's one man. And they keep trying to kill him, by the way. So what happens if they finally do, sadly enough? Well, that was okay while it lasted. This is not sustainable, guys. It's not sustainable. 72 hours ago, Stephanie Ruhle went on Bill Maher and just completely debased herself to a New York Times columnist who said, I cannot believe Kamala doesn't do any interviews or she takes serious questions. And said she doesn't have to do any interviews taking any serious questions. 72 hours later, after Stephanie Ruhle just completely Karen debased herself on Maher, she turns around and Vice President Jezebel gives her first sit-down solo interview. Just not even trying to hide this. Just not even trying to hide the coercion. The agitprop. Just right in our faces. We can't even move one electoral college vote And it's well within the legislative process. We can't even do that. We can give billions of dollars to Zelensky so that he can then turn around and go to Pennsylvania with all the money we gave him and campaign against us. Guys, this isn't even an open marriage. At least you consent to that. This is just getting cheated on and used. And everybody knows you're getting cheated on and used. And you know you're getting cheated on and used. But you're like Richard Gere, an officer and a gentleman. Like, oh, it's nowhere else to go. So you just keep getting cheated on and used. I could sit here and break down more polls. I have no idea how a Texas poll has Trump winning suburbans by 14 and losing women by only 2, but only winning the state by 8. If that happens, he's winning that state by 20 points. Okay, I could do that. I could sit here and tell you Monmouth, that everybody's rating as an A-plus pollster, but got Pennsylvania wrong by 7 points and somehow is still an A-plus pollster. We could do all that. I'll let everybody else do all that. Dominion's our theme this year. Much of what's going to happen in this presidential election from this time forward, I have no control over and can't do anything about. What I do have some dominion over, and so do you, because there's not much you and I can do about the outcome of this presidential election from this time forward either. Short of using our platforms to spread as much of the message of get out the vote as we can. But we can't write ads, we can't impact strategy, none of that. When this is over, we need to have a serious come now and reason together conversation next year about where we go from here. Because this is not sustainable. Where one side is, we will kill millions of children if we think it'll help us win. And the other side is, we won't even move one electoral college vote in a legislative process. Can't win like that, guys. Gentlemen, your thoughts.
And this is why this isn't an election. This is the great trial of the American people. We have to decide who we are and what we want to be, whether we're going to polish our idols even more or we're going to smash them. I can't remember if it was late last night or earlier this morning. I retweeted it doesn't even matter the issue. All of politics and public polling and thinking, it's just everything is just the power of suggestion. Everything is a psyop. We don't really think about issues anymore. We just are constantly doing this and finding out what's acceptable and can we possibly be on the shirts or the skins. That's appalling. That's not America. That can't be America by definition. But it's again, it seems to be who we desperately want to be. It's not just an accident. We're kind of aware of it right now, and it's actually, no, we're good. Again, it's cipher. Ignorance is bliss. We want back in the Matrix. And I'm so glad, Aaron, don't talk about it, but I'm so glad he put in the football story about UNLV. Like, I keep telling you, free at last, God Almighty's free at last. The level of attention people are giving this, that's what they really care about. That poor boy. D1 quarterback starting 3-0. That's not good enough. Don't anybody complain, though. Everybody's complaining. Why? That's what you want. So that's what you get. It's a perfect microcosm of our entire society. We keep flying too close to the sun, and then we fall, and we resent everybody else but ourselves. It's our fault. This is the great trial of the American people, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, and to continue that analogy, the results of this election are either going to be we're pleading guilty or we're pleading innocent. I mean, I guess that comes before a trial. I don't know. But we're going to be found guilty or innocent. Guilty, yeah, we just suck. And we want a Kamala. Or we're pleading innocent. And we're buying ourselves a little bit more time. At the end of the day, this doesn't just end in 41 days. It just doesn't end there. We still have a lot of work to do, one way or another. It's not going to get easy.
Amen. Well, a lot of us started paying attention to issues involving healthcare policy, public health, et cetera, more than we ever had before in light of what we just were forced to confront and what confronted us during COVID. We'll talk more about that in a minute with Dr. Marty Makary. But one of the things we also learned is award-winning, Nobel Prize-winning medications could just suddenly be retconned as dangerous and taken off the market. Other medications that had been given to tens of millions of people over the course of 60 plus years could also now just be retconned as dangerous and taken off the market. Falsely claimed to be killing people when it's been FDA approved for 60 plus years. And that story turned out to not be true, by the way, like many of these other ones. Former cancer drugs with black box warnings could now be retconned and told you they're safe for treating COVID when they don't work with COVID, but they will probably cause you kidney failure. That's what we found out at the University of Iowa when we were one of the pilot studies for remdesivir, right? So if that's you and you're awake to this stuff now, make sure then you get a hold of our friends over at Jace Medical. Get the Jace case to get backups of some of the most important proven medications ever, like amoxicillin, doxycycline, 5 of the greatest antibiotics humanity's ever discovered, because they might be the next to be suddenly too dangerous right when you may need them the most. And now you can also expand your Jace case as well to a wider range of options for your specific meds and needs, even practical stuff like EpiPens and things of that nature too. This is an excellent option in particular, not just for every family in our audience, but if you've got an elderly loved one who is on Medicare, then they're a ward of the state and absolutely still a prisoner and hostage to what just tried to hold us prisoner and hostage the last few years. So this is a great way to get peace of mind for them as well as your family. All right. Go to jace.com, J-A-S-E, jace.com/DACE. Jace.com/DACE. Enter the code DACE at checkout for a discount on your order. Enter the code DACE at checkout for a discount on your order at jace.com/DACE for the Jace case. Enter the code DACE at checkout for a discount at jace.com. All right, let's try this again. Act 2. The name of the book, Blind Spots, When Medicine Gets It Wrong and What It Means for Our Health, from Dr. Marty Makary, one of the people we connected with during COVID when kind of this loosely affiliated band of resistors willing to say, hey, I'm going to need to see the proof on that, kind of emerged organically over the last few years. And Dr. Makary was one of them. And Marty, it's good to see you again. Hopefully this time Skype's going to work. Thank you for joining us on the show and giving us another shot here. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Steve. Good to see you.
So how is it possible? You know what? Let me start here. I got an email from a guy this morning, and he said, hey, as a conservative, I have just been my whole career resistant to the administrative state, resistant to government regulation and private business. And now I find myself wondering, when are they going to start regulating these private businesses? All right. And administrating them, because it seems to me, he said, they're just captured by many of these same corporations. And you know, we used to be able to play big corporations off of big government. Now it seems like they're all wearing the same jersey. So where do we go? I mean, how do we trust them? How do we know that they're going to find their own blind spots, or they even want to? Marty, let's start there.
Well, Steve, you're touching on a very significant issue facing healthcare right now, and that is public trust in doctors and hospitals is way down. And the medical establishment just did their own study published in our top journal, JAMA, that found that trust in doctors and hospitals went from 71% just before the pandemic to 40%, a 31-point drop. And they're scrambling to figure out why. They are blaming it on people who spread misinformation, when the great irony was they have been lying to people for 4 years on so many COVID topics. Now, I don't talk about COVID much in the book because it's a bit tribal and people are sick of it, but COVID was a peek into how a broader medical establishment operates with broad health recommendations. And that's what I think people need to be awakened to. Look, if you're shot or you're in an emergency, do whatever the doctor says. But when it comes to chronic diseases, American healthcare has been a 50-year failure in addressing the root causes.
Why? Is it ineptitude? Is it too much financial incentive to do sick care instead of health care? A combination therein? Why is that the case?
It's the power of groupthink. It's the herd mentality, sometimes turned into a mob mentality, as we saw during COVID. But it is a psychology that I go through in some depth in the book of why we are convinced and firmly hold to what we hear first, not because it's more logical or scientific, it's just what we heard first. The brain gets comfortable with whatever settles in there first. And so we subconsciously dismiss new information or reframe it to fit what we already believe, just to hold on to the comfort and laziness of holding on to what we believed first. And this cognitive dissonance defines a lot of groupthink. And it's not just in medicine, it's in politics and so many other areas of life. And we've got to recognize this bias that we all have, the sort of subconscious laziness to hold on to whatever we believe first. And in medicine, you layer in the sort of pride of the profession. They didn't want to show weakness by changing their position, so they would constantly reframe new medical information, new studies, to make it fit what they were already saying, even though at a certain point they were clowning themselves.
Let's talk about something basic that you address in your book. Okay. When I'm 51 years old, when I was growing up, we had the Reese's peanut butter cup ads where the kid took the entire bar of chocolate and dipped it into the jar of peanut butter. And that was kind of how Reese's peanut butter cups were discovered. Peanut butter was a food group, Marty, when I was growing up. Okay. I mean, it was like Bubba Gump shrimp. We'd fry it, boil it, broil it. All right. We lived on peanut butter. There was no day went by that an average American kid growing up did not have more than the USDA approve of, a portion of peanut butter in a given day. Okay. And now I never heard of peanut allergies, never saw anything like it at all growing up. Okay. Never had a classmate that after eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich had to quick run to the bathroom because he had digestive issues because it was toxic to his system when it entered metabolically. I never saw anything like what we see today. So did we just start having peanut allergies about 2003 and we just didn't know they were there before? What's going on with just something basic like that?
No, peanut allergies did not exist just 2 generations ago. They still don't exist in Africa, parts of Europe, Southeast Asia, most of the world. And what's going on here? It's not genetic. It's not that the American citizen is somehow particularly prone to peanut allergies. No, the American peanut allergy epidemic that we struggle with today was ignited by a medical dogma from the American Academy of Pediatrics in the year 2000. When they said that young children should avoid all peanut butter and other peanut-related products. And they preached this thing hard, and they pounded it in, and they got their pediatricians to be their army and to push this, and it turns out it was all dogma. They had thought that avoiding peanut butter in the first 3 years of life would prevent peanut allergies later in a child's life. They got it perfectly backwards. They forgot about a basic principle called immune tolerance, or the old dirt theory. And that ignited this peanut abstinence, which became this perpetual vicious cycle. As more kids had to avoid peanut butter from the allergy that they got from the avoidance, they would remove peanut butter from the home and from classrooms and ban them in schools. And it became this crazy self-licking ice cream cone. Peanut allergies are real, and kids struggle with them. Children die from them. But this epidemic was by and large ignited by the medical establishment. And again, you see the power of groupthink. And in the book, I show that some doctors were saying, no, this is crazy. Telling infants to avoid a little bit of peanut butter, that's going to create this peanut allergy epidemic. And a small group of doctors did try to fend this off and fight it. But they were sidelined and crushed and railroaded and told that how can you be against the American Academy of Pediatrics? And it's the power of groupthink, which is essentially surrendering your ability to think independently to show allegiance to some broader authority. That's not how science should be done.
It's more systemic now, but maybe the 2 guys that have made the most important medical discoveries in all of human history. Alexander Fleming discovering penicillin, for example. He did not want these things to be patented and used corporately for profit, and that was after years of being told he was a kook, by the way. And then the same people that called him he was a kook, the minute that they got their hands on it, they patented it and made sure to use it for privatized it for profit. There was Semmelweis, who wanted to find out why for 7,000 years the leading cause of death of women was childbirth, because that's kind of important for the sustaining of the species, right? And he just did a simple thing. Just before he delivered any more babies, started washing his hands. I mean, you know these stories better than me, okay? He was treated as a cook. He was treated as a crackpot. They let him die with shock treatment, in a sanitarium at the end of his life. So even in eras where we considered to be more critical thinking and institutions were less captured than what we see today, less politicized than what we see today, this is something that has been an issue within this field, even in the past, right?
Yes, and look, those stories are crazy and comical sometimes, and it's a theme. I've got a chapter in the book called A Brief History of Medical Groupthink, where I go through some of those incredibly outrageous stories. And I don't know whether or not to laugh or cry, because it's still going on today. We said opioids were not addictive for 30 years, igniting the opioid crisis. We said antibiotics have no downsides. We now have altered the microbiomes of a generation, changing the gut health. And we've added ultra-processed foods and addictive chemicals to our food, saying they're safe when they're not. The government has spread misinformation on the food pyramid for 60 years. They just revised it last year into the Food Compass. And that told us that Lucky Charms cereal was healthier than a steak. I mean, these are corrupted officials in our medical establishment putting out dangerous dogma that is getting this bandwagon effect. And the medical establishment sometimes claps like seals and says, oh, this is great work. In the meantime, we've developed these giant blind spots. The role of our food supply being poisoned and what that's done to chronic diseases. We've got half of our nation's children now obese or overweight. Why is that? We like to blame people for their diseases in medicine. Maybe we've poisoned their food supply and put in ultra-processed foods. And the pesticides are not just killing pests in the crops, they're altering the bacterial lining that is the microbiome of our nation's children. So all of these are topics where I go through in depth the truth of what the science actually shows, because people need to know. People have been getting bad information when it comes to the root causes of our chronic disease epidemic.
All right, Marty, 2-minute warning here. What is the path forward? Because there's a lot of ways as Americans we still retain enough autonomy that we can act on our own, but we can't prescribe our own drugs. We can't operate on ourselves, right? This is one area where the amount of autonomy and agency we can exercise is really limited. So let's empower this audience in the final 2 minutes. What can they do? What's the path forward?
Well, look, a bunch of us docs now are saying we're going to go directly to the public and educate them with the latest scientific research on health. Not just talk about sickness and our whack-a-mole system of billing and coding and seeing patients in short visits. We're talking about healthy choices. We're talking about recognizing ultra-processed foods and seed oils, avoiding pesticides on fruits and vegetables where you're eating the surface of those fruits and vegetables, understanding antibiotics, the appropriateness of C-sections and the inappropriateness of C-sections, hormone replacement therapy for women after menopause. The government said that it causes breast cancer when the data never supported it. Turns out there's no better medication to improve the health outcomes of a population than women replacing their natural estrogen with estrogen at the time of menopause. Women live longer and feel better. So a bunch of us are now saying we need a new approach. We need big ideas. We can't keep going down this broken path that healthcare is on. We can't just play whack-a-mole with diseases. We've got to talk about root causes. Maybe we need to treat more diabetes with cooking classes than just throwing insulin at people. Maybe we need to talk about school lunch programs, not putting every young kid on Ozempic. And maybe we need to talk about environmental exposures that cause cancer, not just the chemo to treat it.
Folks, sounds like a book you want to get. It's called Blind Spots, When Medicine Gets It Wrong and What It Means for Our Health. Dr. Marty Makary, good to see you again, Marty. And thanks again for your patience with our technological differences. And we appreciate it. Thank you.
Good to see you, Steve. Thanks.
You bet. Todd, I have to believe that entire conversation was just basically catnip to you.
Thank you, Dr. Makary. Thank goodness we got you back on. I know this is all about healthcare, but I need a cigarette after that. He nails it on. That's been my entire life. Certainly since I met my wife, I was always prone to non-interventionism, just constitutionally. But what I learned after that, folks, and then I just happened to allude to it, not knowing he was going to bring it up, about how there's a study out about how, like, on almost issue, it's ultimately a psyop. The power of suggestion. He just got done talking about how lazy the medical profession is, just kind of going along with the Joneses, not really thinking about anything, i.e. not really doing science, not doing medicine, just trying to be part of the popular kids class. He's absolutely right when he talks about gut health and the way overuse of antibiotics. Nailed it. When you learn about that, your whole worldview changes about medical intervention. I mean, go buy this book, folks. It's as important a book as any we've ever recommended on this show. And if we can reform this healthcare industry, as it seems like there's some level of promise that Donald Trump has to if we reelect him, again, this is a trial of the American people. Do you want real healthcare or do you want sick care? He's showing you an entirely different way, and it's better, and it's not negotiable.
Indeed. And I really appreciate the balance that he struck there, because believe me, there is a well-founded tendency, or at least instinct, after a year like 2020, to completely throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to public health. I mean, you have to. Are C-sections sometimes needed? Absolutely. Are antibiotics sometimes needed? Absolutely. Do you need to do a C-section every single time? Cha-ching. Do you need to sell antibiotics every single time for every single illness? Cha-ching. No. There's a root cause here for basically every issue that we see within the medical establishment. And that is, well, you know what? I can make a little bit of money on this. I can make a little bit more money hawking pills, hawking this, hawking that. You ask my wife, who worked in labor and delivery for a number of years, the number of women who come in there, oh, yeah, I'm going to do a natural birth, absolutely not educated whatsoever about what to expect. And, oh, boy, this really hurts all of a sudden. We're going to go into doing, anesthetization, what have you. And then, all of a sudden, it's a C-section. It's all because of this. It's all because of that.
Yep.
Are C-sections needed sometimes? Yeah. Every time? No. So really speaking my language as well.
Good stuff. We'll come back. It'll be your turn. You guys will take over. We'll play Buy, Sell, or Hold here next. Stay tuned. Back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Steve Deace here with Todd Erzin, Aaron McIntyre, and all of you, though hopefully not all at once, can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. You can email us, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. And again, that's DEACE. And if you listen to the podcast version of the program, thank you, because without you, we probably wouldn't get to still be doing this program. You're a big part of our audience. So make sure you show how much you love us by giving us a 5-star review. And thanks to all of you who have. You can also hit subscribe, or if you're on iTunes, follow, and that will assure that every time we do one of these new episodes, it'll be right there in your podcast feed every single time as well. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, Daniel Horowitz will be joining us, the weekly prophet of woe and lamentation. We'll get to Buy, Sell, or Hold here now, though, brought to you by our friends over at realestateagentsitrust.com. In these unprecedented times.
Bing, 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 bing.
Indeed. Make sure, if you're going to take advantage of the interest rate cut they just did to try to carry Kamila's carcass across the finish line, if you're going to take advantage of that, make sure you go in there with an agent you can trust, because this is still one of the murkiest real estate markets in American history right now. Look for someone with a track record of success. And where would you find them? Well, the name kind of says it all. That's why we created this website and this database at realestateagentsitrust.com. These are agents whose track record of success we have verified and validated. Otherwise, we wouldn't list them and then recommend them to you. And you're going to find that a lot of times they come from right here in the Blaze audience as well. All right. And whether you need to get across country or just across town, we've got an agent that'll help you get the dub and get you to the finish line of where you want to go. Realestateagentsitrust.com. That's realestateagentsitrust.com. Which brings us now to buy, sell, or hold. Aaron has the submissions. You in the audience made them. Todd and I have yet to see them. We will see as many of these as we can. The rest that remain we'll get to in the overtime today for Blaze TV subscribers at blazetv.com/Deace. If you want to become one, go there. And Todd, you and I are going to buy. We're going to sell. If at any point, however, we have fully emasculated ourselves to using a hold and embarrassed America and violated the dude code, your penalty is you have to sit on Lindsey Graham's lap as he watches the P. Diddy White Party videos. That's what you have to do.
I mean, that's really terrible, but I'm shocked that you had to, like, wasn't it just enough to say sit on Lindsey Graham's lap at this point? Like, why do we need to...
I had to double down, so to speak.
What more needs to be said after that?
Could have just stopped right there. Don't place a period where Lindsey, or don't place a comma where Lindsey Graham has placed a period, is what Todd says. Yes.
I think you've established a precedent that whatever you say after Lindsey Graham's lap, it's not good.
All right. Indeed. It's a little bit like I said to my son once when we started working out together. I was teaching him Russian twist. He was just a little dude. He's like, these are hard. I said, yeah. Pretty much anything that starts with Russian is bad. All right, Aaron, go ahead.
We're going to begin with Cows with Guns. The Steve Deace Show will switch from Skype to Zoom by the end of the year, or Aaron will have a meltdown live. Funny you should submit that, Cows with Guns. I had a meltdown live about a half an hour ago. It's just that the camera wasn't on me and my microphone was not on. Todd can attest to this. Some choice words were said. The funny thing is, we did go from Skype to Zoom earlier in the show because as soon as we went on with the intro music, you said, I can't hear that. I'm like, okay, you can't chance cutting out. You could hear us. You could hear Todd and I. During the break now, we got you back on Skype because it's not potato quality. You could hear the spoken word promos coming from Blaze Radio Network. But any music, filler music that was played, any intro music, you could not hear that. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. And I'm about to lose my mind.
Do you believe in miracles? The ship takes off and lands nonetheless on a daily basis. That's a miracle.
Zoom, we did Zoom for the last 2 segments, basically. Okay? It was potato quality all of a sudden. Basically, I saw a blob of pixels coming back from you. Now we have you on Skype again, and it's 1080p.
I just love imagining the brass over at the Blaze watching segments like this when we just fill content.
Are we the only show this stuff happens to?
Yes.
Straight up.
Yes.
I cannot go to the 6-figure studio they built for me because there's freaking wasps. Okay. I bought the most expensive residential internet that is offered in the city of Des Moines. Okay. And Zoom took me back to AOL dial-up 1995. Is this happening to any other show? Any other show other than this one?
No. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Melissa B. says, with Trump, we get Saul. With Kamala, we get Nero.
I think I'll buy that to some degree. I mean, I've made the King Saul analogy to Trump. I think he's analogous to several biblical archetypes, actually. Samson, for sure. We've made that analogy, and Saul, for sure. And remember, Saul was a great warrior. He just wasn't David. Okay. But he could also be narcissistic and vindictive, and so can Trump be. You would much rather live under King Saul than Nero. If you're in the covenant, I promise you. This and that analogy, by the way, if you want to carry it out, it's pretty indicative of kind of the differences between the two sides. Is that it can happen. You know, like his desire to escape accountability. So he just hands his entire presidency over to Anthony Fauci. But most of the time, Trump's sinful tendencies, when they're manifested, don't really disrupt us on a daily basis. You know, like I saw somebody on X today was upset about something about Stephen Colbert that Trump ranted about. And they were like, I'm supposed to vote for this? Why do you care? Like, why do you care that Saul doesn't like the sheriff of the tribe of Reuben? Why would that be like And that's why I'm just going to let the Philistines conquer Israel. I don't understand that. I've never understood that. That to me, that is an instinct I don't get. Okay. What I do get, though, is Nero's sinfulness is intended to manifest to disrupt our daily lives. All right. There can be times that Trump's manifested sinful tendencies can disrupt our daily lives. We lived through one. It was called 2020. But by and large, his sinful tendencies, you can just ignore. You don't have to read his stuff. You don't have to watch the clips. You don't have to get all emotional about every ridiculous thing he says or does. Not to mention, who the hell's got time for that? Okay. On the other hand, Nero's sinful tendencies are intentionally trying to disrupt your daily life. He wants to impale you on stakes to light his orgies. Okay. So I think there's some merit to that analogy, so I'll buy it. You bet.
I'll sell. Let's compare apples to apples, Romans to Romans. I'll make Trump Pilate. You know, Nero's a psychopath. Pilate was just confused. His great question, KS Veritas. Just like when Trump butchers it, like he does like COVID, he's just like, he's still confused about the COVID and all of that. It's just, he does not understand the signs of the times, as Pilate clearly didn't. But he was looking to like stay out of trouble. He was looking to like, okay, there's mobs. How do we deal with this? So he's clearly, which is, obviously Pilate is an important story and the most important story never told, but Pilate clearly isn't Nero.
Next, we go to Joe Defiant. Growing tired of being up against the ropes underneath Todd's furious and relentless assaults against sports bro in general, but specifically Michigan, Steve decides to up the ante on his toughness factor and one-up Todd's vinegar game by consuming small amounts of wasp venom until he builds a resistance and can return to the studio with a vengeance.
Oh, no. I don't need to inject wasp venom. I don't feel like I have to prove anything. I'm good. But you did make me laugh. I loved it. It's hilarious. It's a hilarious submission. It's just wrong. So
this is how the Man in Black survives in the
Princess
Bride. Yeah. And furthermore, I will not. I think we're learning that Steve was right last week about Connor Stallings and being a folk hero, because now but if he's a folk hero, this UNLV dude is like Mount Rushmore of folk heroes. I mean, he's what happens if Rosa Parks and Paul Bunyan have a baby. I mean, we are setting the captives free, folks. There's folk heroes everywhere, and I say amen to that.
By the way, in Nashville, when I went down to speak there last week, and I had a couple ladies come up to me that listened to the show and heard you and I going at it about that. And they were like, was that a real argument? I said, oh, yeah. And they were like, are you guys okay? I'm saying, why wouldn't we be? And I realized people are no longer used to hearing men do that. They're just, people are not used to hearing men able to aggressively argue something and get upset with each other and then just turn right around and say, all right, I'm buying the next round. But they're just not used to that. That's just not male behavior that they're typically accustomed to, not even in the in the Bible Belt, And so the idea that there can be, even with an extreme disagreement, must mean all friendships and we're at the end of things. Okay. That really drove home to me again how little we have been exposed in recent memory to traditionally masculine traits. Okay.
I think what you're trying to say, Steve, is that you and I are even greater folk heroes than Connor Stallions. I agree.
Yeah, no.
I totally agree.
I will buy that. Yes.
Knowing Steve and Todd, there is probably a greater chance, though not a great chance, a greater chance they would have a serious issue with me for scheming up that segment than they would with each other for actually arguing what they were arguing over.
Correct. Because it was very clear that Aaron was provoking, which is another masculine trait. Hey, let me take my two friends who disagree on this and let's just provoke him. I'm just sit back here and have fun watching it. Again, these are things we're not used to seeing. We're used to seeing.
That was fun.
I used to do stuff like that. It was called being a guy. Okay. Now we see dudes take hymns from church and rewrite them to praise the Colts for winning preseason games. That's what we see now. So we're not used to these kinds of things anymore. Yeah.
That guy needs to be in prison. I'm not joking. Aaron Reale says America was never supposed to be multicultural. It was meant to be a civic representation of God's kingdom. One people made up of individuals from every tongue, nation, joined together by adherence to Christian principles and beliefs. The ball was dropped, but the goal was good.
Buy.
I will buy. By and large, I'll buy that. In a generic sense of Christian belief. I mean, we had 13 colonies, and 12 of them were founded by different vestiges, were inspired or founded by different vestiges of the Christian church. One of them, Rhode Island, was founded specifically to provide kind of a safe haven for Christians of various persuasions to live. And so it wasn't for necessarily the expression of a specific theology. They had very vigorous debates in their day too. Okay. But overall, the idea that the biblical ethic was what defined the laws of nature and nature's God, and what had been revealed throughout history to be what's best for what's best, true, and beautiful for the human condition. That's unquestioned in all of their writings, regardless of what their spiritual state at a given time was. Whether you have the more licentious Benjamin Franklin, who was making his wife raise children he had with other women, whether it is Thomas Paine, who would kind of be your libertarian, Randian libertarian, the closest proto version of that in the late 18th century that the founding fathers had, whether this was men of devout Orthodox faith like a Benjamin Rush or a Patrick Henry, who knew their theology and were very active in their churches, but they recognize that something must bind the people together for there to be a social compact. Something must make the people simultaneously accountable to something for it to be possible for them to govern themselves. All right. And that something was going to be the biblical worldview as best understood in a generic sense. And I don't even think that's arguable when you look at their writings and then you look at the way they determined the country. Because ultimately, we cannot have e pluribus unum, out of one many. It's not out of many one. It's out of one many. Well, out of one what? Out of one what? What are we out of one? Just a landmass? No. Okay, so I would agree with that. Now, people on the other side are going to say, well, that you're a Christo-fascist, theocrat, nationalist. Well, part of the Christian ethic is to love my neighbor as I love myself. Okay, so I do not violate the God-given rights of my neighbor, even if they think the Bible is bunk. I don't violate the God-given rights of my neighbor because I wouldn't want him to do the same to me. If he had hegemony in the culture, I wouldn't want him to turn around and say, well, your God-given rights are now null and void, which, by the way, is exactly what is happening with the American left. That's what they're doing to us now. Your God-given rights are null and void. We're not to do that. All right, we are not to do evil so that good may come. We are to love our neighbors. We love ourselves. So, no, you may think the Bible is bunk, but as long as you're willing to live by the same code, then that's between you and God, and not for me to impose on you either. All right, that is the very definition of social compact. And through times of tumult and division, from Boxer and whiskey rebellions to the civil rights marches of the 60s. All right. There was plenty of social upheaval throughout the history of America. All right. But that is what kept that social compact ultimately, even though there were times, man, that it looked like it was on life support, ultimately stood the test of time and kept us together as a people. And that social compact now is what the left has broken. And that's why we are where we are now.
Yeah, diversity is not our strength. But breaking news, Steve, as mail-in balloting goes on in earnest, the Postal Union sent a letter calling Trump an existential threat. Your thoughts?
I am completely sure that the people who are going to be assembling at least a significant portion of the 150 million ballots about to be cast, taking such a position can be counted upon. To operate completely on the up and up and completely unbiased, I'm sure.
Yes, just loyal public servants airing their opinions, just like you and me.
And there's going to be like, you guys, thank you, because Todd, what you just did is there's going to be like 40 mailmen in this audience who are good people, just good Americans. That's not us. That's not us. We're not talking about you. Okay. But you need to speak to your union. There's just no reason for no one. The postal union doesn't need to take a position on the election. Okay. No one cares. Unless they're going to be the shipment and delivery mechanism for a significant chunk of the vote. And now you're making us care. And we should never have had to.
Just like the founders intended.
Yes, this is what Benjamin Franklin had in mind when he was the first postmaster general. This conversation. You bet. Yes.
Next, we go to Alex Pfeiffer, who says, I miss the days of the show when Aaron would discuss his satisfaction of using a back scrubber. This was back before he was married, and because of those deep conversations back then, I bought one. Buy, sell, or hold. Back scrubbers are awesome. P.S. The one I bought back then just broke last night. It's been difficult to get through the day. I don't recall any of this. Do you?
Oh, yeah, I remember it. And
you do.
I'm selling because no one wants to return to those days.
Yeah.
I don't want to return to those shows, but I'm a big buyer on back scrubbers. I like them.
Okay.
I'm a big fan. So I'll buy on back scrubbers, sell on Aaron discussing his back scrubber.
Yeah,
Thank you, Alex.
I haven't used one for years now. I don't even recall this conversation happening. Dustin E.J. D'Entremont says, the normative means God uses in Scripture to draw a people back to himself is top down with strong, godly men, not bottom up through spontaneous mass revival.
I mean, I will sell. Well, hold on. Let me make sure I have his proposition up directly. The normative means. Okay, then I'll buy.
Yeah.
All right. That's the determining phrase there, and I missed it the first time. Yeah. Okay. So that is the normative means. Correct. All right. I mean, awakenings aren't perennial occurrences. Okay. But a man of God, under the power of the Holy Spirit with a Bible open in a pulpit is a weekly occurrence. At least, So I would agree that is the normative means. So I like the way that you worded that. I'm fine with it. I'll buy.
Agree, which is why revival isn't just going to happen. Who's going first? Who's going to say it? Which churches? Which leaders? That's how this is an important point, and we keep thinking that this is just kind of like some hoodoo over there, and it's just no. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works.
Next, Uncommon Joyce says, buy, sell, or hold. If Kamala Harris wins, what's happening to Christians in Canada and England will begin happening within the first year or two of her administration.
Buy.
Sell. It's already
absolutely
happening.
Buy. I mean, we're already, well, I was just going to say we're already seeing the warning shots of this. But, yeah, go back to what I just said last hour. We're not going to go from I will redetermine the entire legislative process in order to put unrestricted, undaunted, state-sanctioned infanticide codified into U.S. code but those of you who think that we're murdering our kids and sacrificing to demons, we're going to completely leave you guys alone and let you pester our consciences by reminding us that that's exactly what we're doing. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Okay. When the social compact is broken, and now it is, we're not the ones who broke it. They did. And they didn't do it inadvertently. They did it on purpose. Okay. So when the social compact is broken, as it now is, all right, politics becomes a zero-sum game. And that's where we are now.
Next up, Todd, did you want to add anything to that?
Nope.
Okay. Next up, Kitten Stock Supplier says millennials and Gen Z have legitimate reasons to be upset that we were not given the America promised by our fathers. He attached this graphic of the increasing income housing gap. Buy, sell, or hold.
I wholeheartedly agree. I wholeheartedly buy. And I had these conversations a couple of years ago during the whole when we were debating canceling student loan debt and everything else. And one generation is going to say, you work for my retirement and you work for my health care, but you don't get your student loans forgiven. This is what the welfare state does. It pits us against each other. That's what it does. Okay. That's why when God created his own nation called Israel, and it was a direct theocracy under not just his sovereignty, but under his direct rule. Okay, meaning he wasn't appointing vassals or vessels or representatives or proxies. It was under his direct rule. The priest went to the Urim and Purim at the temple to actually find out what God wanted to do. Okay, it was under his direct rule. Individuals, not corporately as society, but certain individuals were given his spirit to speak prophetically to the people directly from him to them. So it was directly under his rule. And when he set up his country directly under his rule, they did have a taxation system. Everyone paid the same rate, not just this, but it just wasn't the same amount. Everybody paid 10%. That's what the tithe was. All right. It was a tax. The priests were essentially not just ecclesiastical figures in God's economy. They were also civil magistrates. They were determining issues of property, debate and legal debate and criminal cases as well. They operated in both in both arenas, civically and ecclesiastically. So it wasn't just merely to keep the church going or the temple going, but it was also to keep the society going. It was a flat tax. Everybody paid the same rate. It's just Boaz, who was very wealthy, his 10% was a lot less, or a lot more, I should say, than what Ruth, his future wife, would pay, who was destitute. Okay, other than owning a piece of land she couldn't liquefy. So everybody paid the same rate. We didn't pit classes of people against each other, generations against each other. In fact, to even avoid that creeping in, every 7 years there had to be mass debt forgiveness. Every 50 years of Jubilee, there had to be even larger mass debt forgiveness so that these grievances would not carry on to generations after generations. So you have Hatfields of McCoy in Hebrew. That's why God did it all this way. We have done everything since 1918. Basically, we've done everything the exact opposite of that. Okay. And that's one of the main things we've done to break the social compact is this progressive tax scheme and system that pits groups and generations of people together or against each other ongoing into perpetuity.
I don't feel as strongly as Steve about it, but I will buy. There's enough there. I mean, those generations default into believing unsustainable nonsense in so many other levels. I'm just like, their grievance on this just falls flat. But I like I said, I think Steve's base premise is correct.
Next, Denethor 2024 says, this is how Lindsey Graham asks the stuck in the woods with a man or bear question. It's a meme for those of you listening. You'll have to come back and watch. Lindsey asks Steve, would you rather be stuck in the woods with a man or a bear? Steve says the man, of course. And then Lindsey says, now, what if I'm the man?
This is my point, how we started the show. You don't need to know anything more about if it's in the woods or if it's at Congress or on his lap or whatever. It's just Lindsey Graham. That's it. That's all you need to know.
I'm very confident in my odds of overtaking Lindsey Graham compared to a bear. Very confident. So I don't know if that means, Aaron, am I buying or selling that? But that would be how I would answer.
He can't wait for you to try to overtake him, Steve.
Yeah.
There it is. There it is.
Clinton Shaw says, Diddy will be the October surprise for Kamala with evidence linking him to her. However, nobody's going to care because we're too comfortable, and it will be yet another test we fail as a nation.
Bye. I'll
sell it. I think we're good. I think we're going to see hashtag Diddy didn't kill himself before they would allow that to happen. I think that would take providential action of God putting his thumb on the scale, because systematically they'll Epstein him before they would allow something like that to happen.
I don't disagree with that. I just need to see. It's like yesterday at the election. I need to see certain things with my own eyes. I just need to see people like, well, now that I see the dots connected from Diddy to Kamala, my whole worldview has changed.
Sure. Good point. Yeah.
Ethan McClelland says Dace would spend time alone in a room with Lindsey Graham before stating that Michigan cheated. P.S. I'm a Michigan fan.
Bye.
Sell. I mean, if I thought Michigan cheated, I would just admit it. I mean, they absolutely cheated with the Fab Five. Ed Martin paid Chris Webber money, and they deserved the probation they got. Now, it was stupid to add another 8 years onto that internally and wreck your program, but if they cheated, if I thought they cheated, I would admit it. So I will sell. That's why we're debating, did they cheat or not? What rule did they break or not? So I would sell.
Corey Tacker says Steve books his plane trips to intentionally avoid staying 30 minutes later for overtimes. Yeah, because that happens so frequently.
No, it's just, it happens typically actually only when I go to Dallas, because there's a limited amount. So I'm going to sell, but there's a limited amount of straight flights from Des Moines to Dallas every day, and the times vary, and American switches them up every quarter, and so sometimes they run like at 3:00 in the afternoon, and then sometimes they run at like 1:30, and the other one is when I fly Allegiant to go to Nashville, because that's the only way to go direct from Des Moines to Nashville is Allegiant, and same thing happens with them, and that's what happened last week. So I will sell.
Steve invented the overtime, like for the whole network. He started doing it, and then everybody said that's a good idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everybody hates me now because they have to do more work, because it worked out so well for us when we did it. Correct. Yeah.
No, they hate you because Michigan cheated, not because of that. They love you because of that.
Nice.
Jay
nice.
Ford
Well
says
played. I'm gonna give you that one.
We've gone from a Star Wars coven of lesbian witches to a Marvel Studios coven of lesbian witches. Disney is running out of ideas.
When you put it like that.
Bye.
Okay.
But my wife asked me about that because the commercial was on TV, and she says, "So are anybody saying anything about that like they are about the Acolyte?" And I honestly was like, "That's a great point," because I have not seen anybody talking about that thing. Agatha at all. I haven't seen or heard anything about it, good, bad, or otherwise.
It supposedly came out last week.
One is one is there was already not a lot of hype for it anyway. This is a rather insignificant character in long-term Marvel canon, and so there wasn't as much buzz for this as there was for Star Wars: The Acolyte. Number one. Number two is all the focus and buzz is on the Penguin show. Airing right now on Max, which is the first extension of the Matt Reeves, Robert Pattinson Batman universe. And the reviews for that people are raving about that. I watched Critical Drinker's take on that last night because and he raved about it. And so there was nothing else coming out to compete with the Acolyte. So all the genre energy went there. In this case, there's way more buzz about the Penguin series than the Agatha one. And they're not getting quite the blowback because there's so much excitement about what's going on with the Penguin series so far.
That's it.
All right. We have any left for overtime? Or are we just out of time?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We're out of time.
All right, good. Okay. When we come back, Daniel Horowitz will be with us right here. Stay tuned. Back here on the Steve Deace Show here, powered by our friends over at First Liberty. That's Kelly Shackelford and those people. They have been on the front lines for many, many years fighting for our liberty in the court of law, and they have many, many wins. But now they're concerned about what the left wants to do to reconfigure those courts, because apparently what they've already done for the last 100 years to reconfigure them wasn't enough. Now they're openly running. We have Democratic candidates for Congress openly running on stacking the court. Just openly running on it. All right. So if you want to have your voice join in the movement to push back against this, you can do so and align with our friends over at First Liberty and learn more about their efforts to defend your liberties when you go to supremecoup.com/Steve. COUP. Supremecoup.com/Steve. You can learn how you can help stop the left's radical takeover of the judiciary and also lend your name to that effort as well at supremecoup.com/Steve. That's supremecoup.com/Steve. Finally, don't forget our colleague Allie Stuckey's got that event coming up this weekend, ladies. So still time to get your tickets if you want to go to Share the Arrows and be there with Allie and Candace Cameron Bure, Rosario Butterfield, Francesca Battistelli, and more. Brought to you by Carly Jean Los Angeles. There are numerous packages to make it as flexible and affordable for you as absolutely possible. All right. So if you're looking for a great weekend of encouraging fellowship and inspiring worship, you can attend this amazing event. Get your tickets now at sharethearrows.com. That's sharethearrows.com is where you can go today. Now we're going to go to the weekly prophet of woe and lamentation himself, our good friend Daniel Horowitz. It's good to see you, brother. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing all right. Steve, the coup is up and away. It's going on even before that.
I want to get your thoughts. I said this before you came on at the top of the show today. Right now we're in the heat of the moment. We're in the heat of the game. We got to win the game in front of us. Okay. Let me give an analogy about my Michigan Wolverines. Had to win this game against USC last weekend. Whole season was on the line. Okay. Won the game. Great. Saved the season. But that's probably not a formula for long-term success the rest of the year. Your quarterback throwing for 32 yards. So there's some structural things there that got to be addressed moving forward. Glad you won the game. We had to win that game. Had to win. Back against the wall. But that's not the last game. There'll be more games after this now. And we have some structural issues that have to be addressed, right? That's my analogy for the American right. And I know you talk about this a ton on your podcast there at Conservative Review, but yesterday to me is one of the most crystallized examples I can ever remember. On the same day, Kamala Harris says, I will end the filibuster to have state-sanctioned child sacrifice without restriction become the law of the land in the U.S. Code. On the same day she says this, Nebraska Republicans can't be moved to change one electoral college vote, which would force Kamala to win at least one of these Sunbelt states maybe. Now she doesn't have to win any of them, and she could get to 270. I mean, so they won't even use the normal legislative process to reallocate one electoral college vote. The other side's out there just busting through every veil, every wall, every norm you could imagine before we even get to the normative legislative process. And it's over something as wicked as killing children. That to me, just again, watching Zelensky yesterday, watching Republicans for 2 years, this is really why they kept the government open. If we're all really being honest, it's over Ukraine. And they gave that guy how many billions of our dollars against their basest wishes. And how did he repay them? He went to Pennsylvania yesterday or on Monday and campaigned for Kamala and the Democrats. I mean, when this is over, we got to win the game in front of us right here, brother. But when this one's over, we got to address the structural problems we have here on the right, because this is not a sustainable coalition on any level, Daniel. It's just not.
You know, Steve, about the Ukraine thing, they wouldn't even get anything in return for it, at least leverage it for anything on the border or anything. This is a Congress where every single major budget bill has been passed and will continue this afternoon, has been passed with more Democrat support than Republican support, but shepherded through the floor by Republican floor leaders. This is a Congress where Biden is remaking America, flooding our neighborhoods. They went on vacation for 7 weeks, come back just for a few days to quickly give Democrats everything they want. Now they'll be out for another 7 weeks. You mentioned Nebraska. Okay. This was always the point I was trying to make to people. We always had these theoretical fights. Well, if we had a couple more seats and we need more power, this and that. I said, look, we have a parallel system of government in America where states and even sometimes counties have parallel 3 governments, and within their sphere of policy, they operate autonomously. And I said, look, we have a lot of control groups on this theory. And you have places where Republicans have 80%, 70% majorities. I mean, imagine going to the U.S. Senate and waking up, one election day in November, and you have 80 Republican senators. And you have that everywhere, where the media is not a factor, where maybe dependency on programs might not be a factor, social liberalism might not be a factor in the electorate, and they do the same things. And it gets back to a point that this is not a stupid party. It's not like, okay, you have the, evil party and the stupid party. They're not stupid. They just don't share our values. They'll fight when they want to. Like in primaries, actually, they'll be pretty effective and efficient in winning when they want to come after us. So they're not just the Keystone Cops. It's that they don't believe in what we believe in. You have in Nebraska now, Deb Fischer, 3 polls show her in a dead heat with an independent sort of Democrat running as an independent in Nebraska. Now, how does that happen? Well, that happens when you have a uniparty Republican that literally the only thing she does is Ukraine and some special interest pork stuff with big ag and big ethanol and wind and that sort of thing. What happens is you share power in the state with Democrats. It becomes a Democrat state. We saw this in Alaska. We saw this last generation with Colorado and Virginia. We're seeing it now in Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina, and it's going to be one after another. they're getting rid of Republican majorities. They misuse them, and then it just gives Democrats agency, a conduit into your state, and they win. Let me give you just one more example on this point. So, as you well know, I've been covering these ballot measures throughout the country. There's civilization fights on life, ubiquitous marijuana, election anomalies that will allow Soros to compete in red states. So these jungle primaries and ranked choice voting, all sorts of things. And on every single one, Democrats are outspending us 10, 20, 50 to 1. Some of them, there's no money in opposition. And almost none of them has the Republican Party or a Republican governor in any of these states uttered a word. Like this guy Pillen, the Nebraska governor, I don't believe he has mentioned a word about, I don't have the number here, but whatever that amendment is in Nebraska that's similar to Florida Amendment 4 that will have abortion on demand. You have in South Dakota, you have marijuana, you got abortion, you got abolishing like partisan primaries is on the ballot. And the governor, so there's about 6 amendments, very consequential. She's uttered not a word on any of them until half-heartedly on abortion when she was shamed into it. But there's one amendment she got on there complaining about the lack of female pronouns in the state's constitution, that it's all written like from a male perspective. So she wants that changed. That is her fight. Okay, so you think of inflation, invasion, indoctrination, turning red states blue, all this stuff. That is what is on the minds of these people. I don't think our listeners fully comprehend that. These are people that wake up every day, get on conference calls with their industries, and they're not inspired by anything. Like Biden could create a program that we're going to go and lock up every conservative, rape your wives, whatever he does. And they'll be like, hey, you know, about that EV plant over there, you know, how can we finagle some of the Green New Deal subsidies that we pretended to impose? And, you know, we need some cheap labor at the meatpacking plants. That's how their mind works. Their God is not our God. Their values are not our values. Their ways of thinking are not our ways of thinking. And until we structurally deal with that, I'm trying to formulate a couple of strategies. We're not doing anything. We're not achieving anything.
I think that there is an increasing number of people who recognize what you and I are talking about, but also recognize that we don't have any other options. We're out of time. Yeah, these guys are all corporately funded. We can't compete with them. They just blow us out. We gain any traction at all. Fox News just puts their thumb on the scale and says that's who's going to win. And I mean, it's this or communism. And I think that's where a lot of people, frankly, are right now. And I think that's where, how do you reconcile Gallup simultaneously telling us in the last 2 weeks that Democrats have a massive enthusiasm gap, but then telling us now for the first time ever in their polling in the third quarter, Republicans have the voter ID advantage? I think that's one way. You know, they could just be lying to us and wrong, although Gallup's track record is good, but we're living in an era where everybody lies pretty much to us eventually. But one way you could, before we got to that, you could intellectually justify that, is that a lot of our people are going to show up en masse, but they're really not all that excited about it. They recognize what they have to do here and why they have to do it, but it's basically nothing more. It's more survival instinct than enthusiasm, and it's hard to carry that sentiment forward long term.
No, it is. And there are a few places where we do have agency. There are a lot of examples of where we actually get a movement together and fight for something. We are making advances. Like I will say, for all the talk, for all the complaints, come January 2025, we will have the most conservative orientation of state legislatures, varying dependent on the state, than we've ever had. And a couple of them, we have an opportunity to elect people like you and me as speaker and majority leader in places like South Dakota House, Wyoming House, possibly Texas. There's a lot there for us to work on. I mean, people who listen to my show every day know the issues, strategies. There's a lot we can do. We just don't have a megaphone to focus people's attention on it. And every time we start to get some sort of traction, the Republicans sabotage it. Like right now, there's a lot of traction on people speaking out at these local city council meetings about their communities being transformed by the invasion. And there's a lot we can do on this. And you mentioned the polling, Steve. the polls are retarded. Okay. I mean, if you take the sum total of them, they don't make sense. So that's why, to me, I feel you have to assume, you have to go with the election results we're seeing, even up to this year where the Democrats seem to be winning. But we'll find out. But the point is, there is one thing that has been very consistent, and that is Republicans, if you poll the issues of safety, security, and prosperity, however you want to poll it. Okay, so you have the CNN poll that has, Trump up 14 with immigration, maybe 10 on economy, 7 on foreign policy, yet it has him behind 4 with independence. Okay, we have seen that consistently.
By the way, just to show you how retarded this whole thing is, one second, just to back you up what you just said. Yesterday, the head of Rasmussen Polling, not Scott Rasmussen, he sold that company, he has his own company now. The head of Rasmussen Polling went on X yesterday and criticized the New York Times for saying that its poll of Pennsylvania, or its Sunbelt poll that it put out earlier this week, was too oversampled for Trump. You can't make that up. No one had that on their Pat Gray bingo card. Rasmussen telling the New York Times your poll is too Trump biased. What do you even do with stuff like that? I don't even know what to even contemplate, what to even say in response to that. But that did happen yesterday afternoon.
No, and that's what I'm saying. But I think one thing we could take out, because it's just logically true, we don't need a poll to tell us that, is that there has never been a time in history where you had an incumbent party owning such melees, destruction. We might be a transformed secular society, which we unfortunately are. But I think one thing, people might want a lot of Medicaid and food stamps, maybe, but they don't want it for every third world country invading and transforming their neighborhood. Outside of the top 20% retards, that's not popular. Okay. And yet Republicans will not fight on that nationally. You find in all these localities where what's happening is they feast off the carcass of America, these city councilmen, these Republican county party chairs, and the lawyers. They work with the local business interests to bring in the third world labor, set up a labor barracks style living in a quaint town, destroy their town. But hey, they get some profit off of the NGOs and the federal government money pumped into it. That's how they think. And what I found is anywhere where people like myself have not poked the bear, have not exerted an affirmative effort to change it, you spot check any Trump plus 30 county, check the city council member, the Republican county commissioner, the Republican school board. They suck. Everyone. The only advancement is in the legislatures. Why? Andy Roth and the state freedom caucuses. There's a concerted effort to change it. It will not happen on its own.
Great stuff, my friend. Always good to see you. Thank you. Appreciate the time.
Happy to deliver.
You bet. Let's get some reaction here before we close it out from Todd and Aaron. What do you guys think?
Well, his take on the polls is exactly the same as mine yesterday. You see me? The math is, I won't even try. I need to see the real thing happen. Daniel's in the exact same camp. If I'm in the same camp as Daniel on that, I sleep just well at night, even though it's amongst the chaos. Because the weird thing about this, Aaron talks about this all the time, about how much this feels about just like the 2022 principle. Even if we get lucky or something changes and Trump just wins, despite the fact that we've got done saying that we're going to be under attack immediately, but even just the fact that it'll happen won't really make sense. The trial of the American people will still be an ongoing thing. I mean, we are so fickle in terms of what will we have suddenly known that we didn't know before about who these people were, certainly post-COVID. I just think we're in trouble no matter what. If that's not your starting place, no matter what happens, you're not going to get to the right answer.
That's not blackpilling either.
No.
That's not an excuse to throw up your hands and say, let them fight against each other. They'll just let this thing crash. That's not an excuse. That's just reality. Actually, that's the most white-pilled response that you could have as long as you're still engaged. The most white pill outlook you could have about this country is that regardless of the outcome of this election at any level, we're still in a lot of trouble as long as you're engaged. If you're disengaged, that's just nihilism. I'm sorry. But if you are engaged in this process, you have to start looking beyond the election immediately if he somehow is able to pull this out. I mean, there are just all sorts of disconcerting signals that I'm seeing all over the place. Featured, you just mentioned the Gallup thing this morning. I don't know what to make of it, heads or tails. We've talked about this, and we will continue to talk about this ad nauseum. It's chaotic. But regardless of the outcome, we have to stay engaged.
Amen. Amen. You know, we're at the state of the dark night when Bruce says to Alfred, "What would you have me do?" Endure. That's where we kind of are right now. We have to stay in the fight. Romans 8:28.